My son called on a Tuesday morning while I was drinking my first cup of coffee on the back porch, watching the marsh grass sway in the low tide wind off the Georgia coast. I had been living on that porch for 31 years. I knew every sound it made, every creak of the boards, the way the salt air collected in the corners of the railing during a storm. I picked up the phone on the second ring because I thought maybe he was calling to say he was coming down for the weekend. I thought maybe we would fish off the dock like we used to do before Dot died, and everything between us turned to obligation and distance. I was wrong. Dad, listen. I don't have a lot of time. His voice was flat, like he was reading from a list. Me and Nikki are heading back to Atlanta. First thing tomorrow morning. We just wanted you to know that the house, the Tybee house, we went ahead and sold it. The closing happened yesterday. The new owners are a development group. They are planning to convert the property. They need it vacant within 48 hours, so you are going to have to make some arrangements. I set the coffee cup down on the porch railing. The ceramic made a small sound against the wood. Below me, a brown pelican was gliding low over the water, barely moving its wings, riding the air in a long, slow curve toward the dock. I watched it and I felt my heart do something strange, a kind of lurch inside my chest like a car engine turning over in cold weather. I said, "Son, what did you just say to me?" It was not a question. My voice was very quiet. He sighed. The kind of sigh that tells you the person on the other end of the phone has already decided you are going to be difficult. Dad, come on. You knew this day would come eventually. The house is in my name. It has been for 12 years. Me and Nikki need the liquidity. We have got some business situations we are dealing with. And frankly, the property is just sitting there. You can get a rental in Savannah, something easier to manage at your age. The development group is very motivated. They paid a fair price. Everything is done. The paperwork is signed. I thought about the garden Dot had planted along the south wall of the house. She had spent 3 summers getting the gardenias to take root in that sandy soil. She had read books about coastal gardening. She had driven 40 miles to a specialty nursery and come back with her car full of plants and a smile so wide it had made me laugh out loud in the driveway. The gardenias had bloomed every May since 2009, without a single year missed. Even the hard year after she got sick. Even the terrible year after she was gone. "Caleb," I said, "this is our home. It is my property," he said. And he said it without cruelty, which was somehow worse than if he had been mean about it. He said it the way a man states a legal fact. Just the way things are. I am sorry if this is hard, but Nikki and I have to do what is right for us. There is a Motel 6 on Highway 80 that would work fine for a few nights while you figure things out. I already checked, and they have availability. I really do have to go, Dad. I am sorry. He hung up. I sat on that porch for a long time. Long enough for the pelican to come back from wherever it had gone. Long enough for the tide to shift. I thought about the day I poured the foundation of that house. Dot standing in the yard with a blueprint rolled up under her arm, pointing at different spots in the dirt, and telling me exactly where she wanted the kitchen window so it would catch the morning light over the water. I thought about the Christmas when Caleb was 8 years old, and he fell asleep under the tree, and Dot and I carried him to his bed without waking him, and then we sat on this same porch in the December cold, with 2 glasses of wine, and just listened to the ocean. Then I stood up. I went inside. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, and I called a number I had not dialed in nearly 2 years. Jerry Hobbs answered on the 3rd ring, sounding like he had been in the middle of something. "It is Walter," I said. "Something has happened. I need to talk to you tonight. If you can manage it." He heard something in my voice. "Where?" he said. "That diner on Butler. The one with the bad pie but the good coffee." "I will be there at 7, he said. Before I left, I walked through the house room by room. I was not sentimental about the furniture. I did not stop to look at the walls or the light fixtures. I went straight to the bedroom, to the cedar chest at the foot of the bed where Dot kept her grandmother's quilt. It was a double wedding ring pattern in blue and cream, sewn by hand by a woman who had been dead for 70 years. Dot had never put it on a bed because she was afraid of wearing it out. She had just kept it folded in the cedar. And sometimes in the winter, she would take it out and hold it in her lap and tell me about her grandmother. And I would sit next to her and listen. I lifted the quilt out of the chest and folded it carefully and tucked it under my arm. Then I walked out the front door, got in my truck, and drove to the Motel 6 on Highway 80. The room smelled like someone had tried to clean it with something that made the original smell worse. I set the quilt on the one chair by the window and sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the wall. Outside, a truck on the highway downshifted hard, and the sound rattled the glass in the frame. I had built things my entire career. Subdivisions, commercial parks, a small shopping center outside of Pooler that had been there for 25 years. I knew property. I knew contracts. I knew the way that legal documents could be arranged like a chessboard, with pieces that looked invisible until the moment you needed them. 12 years ago, when Caleb was 26 and just starting his first restaurant venture, I had done what any good father with a background in real estate would do. I had structured a tax-advantaged transfer of the house on Tybee Island to protect the asset from estate taxes and to help him establish himself financially. On paper, the house went into his name. The structure, the improvements, the building itself, that was what everyone saw. That was what Caleb saw. What Caleb had never asked about, never read closely, was the land underneath the house. The 3 acres of Tybee Island shoreline that the house sat on were held separately, in a limited liability company I had formed called Coastal Gains Holdings. I was the sole member. Unprecedented. 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 I had drafted a ground lease between Coastal Gains Holdings as landlord and Caleb as tenant, giving him the right to use the land for a term of 12 years in exchange for a nominal annual fee. The lease contained a standard reversionary clause. If it was not renewed in writing at least 60 days before expiration, the right to occupy the land terminated automatically, and all improvements, meaning the house, the dock, the seawall, everything, would revert to Coastal Gains Holdings. Caleb had signed the lease when he was 26 years old. I had been standing in this very room explaining what I was doing, but his eyes were somewhere else that day. He was already thinking about his restaurant. He had signed where I pointed and thanked me, and never looked at the document again. The lease expired at midnight tonight. I picked up the phone and called Jerry. He was already at the diner when I arrived. He had a cup of coffee and a yellow legal pad, and the particular expression he had always worn when things were about to get serious. A kind of tightening around the eyes that I had first seen 30 years ago when we were both young men fighting over a commercial lease dispute and he had been on the other side. I slid in across from him and told him everything. He did not interrupt. He just wrote on the yellow pad in his cramped, precise handwriting, nodding occasionally, asking 1 or 2 questions in a quiet voice. When I finished, he looked at his notes for a long moment. "Walter," he said, "the ground lease. Did you bring a copy?" I pulled the document from my jacket pocket. It was folded in thirds, a little creased, but intact. I had kept a copy in my safe deposit box at the bank for 12 years, alongside the LLC operating agreement, the deed for the land, and the title insurance policy. I slid it across the table. He read it slowly. He read it the way a good lawyer reads something important, like he was eating it, not just looking at it. When he got to clause 16, he stopped and read it twice. He set the paper down. He said, "So, Caleb sold the house this morning. The closing happened yesterday. You said." That is what he told me. "And the buyer is a development group." He said the name was something about coastal properties. He did not give me details. Jerry tapped his pen against the table once, twice. "Walter," he said slowly, "if this document is what I think it is, then your son just sold a house that, as of midnight tonight, he no longer has any legal right to transfer. He signed a deed for a structure that will, in 7 hours and 42 minutes, revert to Coastal Gains Holdings. To you." "I know," I said. Jerry looked at me for a long moment across the table. He had known me for 30 years. He knew what I looked like when I was just figuring something out, and what I looked like when I had already figured it out. Days ago. You knew this was coming, he said quietly. The expiration. You knew. I knew the date of the expiration, yes. I have known it for 12 years. And you did not remind him. He never asked me. Jerry. He called me this morning and told me my house was sold. He did not ask me about any underlying documents. He did not consult an attorney. He did not do a proper title search. Neither did his buyer, apparently. They moved so fast, they skipped the due diligence. That is not something I did to him. That is something he did to himself. Jerry was quiet for a moment. Outside, a car passed on Butler Avenue with its radio playing something with a heavy bass line. What do you want to do? He said. I want you to find out who bought this property and what they know. I want you to prepare the paperwork to enforce the reversionary clause. And I want to know what kind of trouble my son is actually in. Because a man does not sell a $2.8 million property at a fire sale price on 48 hours' notice unless something bad is chasing him. Jerry nodded. He closed the legal pad and finished his coffee. Do you want to warn him? He said. Before midnight, you could call him. You could give him the chance to unwind the deal. Jerry, I said. He did not give me a chance. He blocked my number after he called me this morning. I found out when I tried to call him back and got a message telling me my call could not be completed. Jerry set his cup down very deliberately. He blocked his own father, he said. I let that sit in the air between us. Then I said, find out who he owes money to. I think there is a reason he needed cash by tomorrow morning, and I want to know what it is before I decide anything. I hired a private investigator the next morning. A man named Cooper, who had worked insurance fraud for 15 years and had the kind of face that people dismissed immediately, which was exactly why he was good at his job. I met him at the Waffle House on Abercorn and explained what I needed. He had a full report on my kitchen table, the motel desk, by 4 p.m. Caleb's restaurant group had been in serious trouble for over a year. He had opened 4 locations of what was supposed to be a upscale coastal seafood concept, and 3 of them were losing money on a scale that would have alarmed anyone paying close attention. The 4th location, the original one in Midtown Atlanta, had been profitable for a while, but a fire suppression system failure 8 months ago had shut it down for 6 weeks and killed its momentum. Caleb had taken on private equity partners 18 months ago who had put in $900,000 on a high-interest structure with a personal guarantee. The loan had come due, and Caleb had missed 2 payments. The partners, a group operating out of a Buckhead office that Cooper described carefully as motivated, had sent a representative to meet with Caleb last week. Nikki had a separate situation. She had invested heavily in a luxury product line she was selling through social media, something in the skincare category. She had $80,000 worth of product in storage that she could not move because the brand had been exposed as misleading in its ingredient claims. 3 credit cards were maxed. Together, Caleb and Nikki owed somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.4 million. And the most urgent piece of that, $900,000 to the private equity group, was already overdue. The house on Tybee had sold for $1.9 million. Cooper found the deed in the county records, filed the previous morning. I looked at the numbers. I looked at what a man does when he owes almost $1 million to people who use the word motivated to describe themselves in business correspondence. I looked at the speed of the sale, nearly $900,000 under appraised value, and I understood exactly what my son had done. He had sold my life to save his neck. That evening, Cooper sent me one more piece of information. Caleb and Nikki were at a dinner at a restaurant called The Gray on Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard in Savannah. They had not gone back to Atlanta yet. They were celebrating. I borrowed Cooper's car, a gray Hyundai that nobody looked at twice, and I parked on the street and watched them through the window of the restaurant. They were at a corner table with another couple I did not recognize. Nikki was wearing a dress I had not seen before. Caleb was ordering wine from the sommelier, pointing at the list and nodding like a man who does not have to think about the price. I could not hear them. I did not need to. I watched my son pour wine for his wife and clink glasses with their friends and lean back in his chair with the particular posture of a man who has just escaped something terrible and does not yet know that what he escaped into is worse. I drove back to the motel. At 11:45 in the evening, I sat on the edge of the motel bed with my phone in my hand and the quilt folded on the chair beside me. I looked at Dot's grandmother's work. All those tiny stitches, all that patience, all that evidence of a woman making something beautiful and permanent out of pieces that seemed unrelated. I thought about the day I transferred the house to Caleb. He had come down for the weekend, and we had gone to the attorney's office on Monday morning and signed everything. On the way back, we stopped at a breakfast place, and I had eggs and grits, and Caleb had a stack of pancakes, and we talked about his restaurant plans, his vision, all the things he was going to build. He had looked so young. He had looked so full of it. In the good way. Full of plans and ideas, and the particular energy of someone who believes that everything is still possible. I had thought I was giving him something permanent. A foundation. The clock on the phone changed to 12:00. I did not feel the ground shift. Nothing moved. There was no sound from outside except the highway. But in the legal records of Chatham County, Georgia, and in the operating documents of Coastal Gains Holdings, LLC, something very real and very permanent had just happened. The 12-year ground lease between my company and my son had expired without renewal. The reversionary clause in Section 16 had activated automatically. The house on Tybee Island, the dock, the seawall, the gardenias along the south wall, all of it had just become the property of Coastal Gains Holdings. Caleb had sold a house to a developer at 1 o'clock in the afternoon yesterday. At midnight tonight, that house stopped belonging to anyone Caleb had the authority to sell it for. I sent Jerry a text message. It said, "It is done. File everything in the morning. Meet me at the property at 9. Then I lay back on the thin mattress, pulled the motel pillow over my face to block out the light from the parking lot, and I slept better than I had in 2 days. Jerry picked me up at 8:30 in his Lincoln. I was wearing a jacket and tie. I had pressed my trousers the night before, using the iron and ironing board that the motel had in the closet, the kind of small iron that takes forever to heat up and never gets fully hot. I had made it work. I was 65 years old, and I had learned a long time ago that the way you walk into a room tells people everything about whether they should be afraid of you. The property on Tybee was a 15-minute drive from town, down the long causeway with the marsh on both sides. The kind of drive that had always felt like a crossing, like you were going from the regular world into somewhere that belonged to its own rules. Dot had called it the threshold drive. She said it every time, even after 30 years. When we pulled up to the house, there were 2 vehicles in the driveway I did not recognize. A white Sprinter van with a company logo on the side, and a black truck. There was a man in khaki pants and a polo shirt standing near the front door with a clipboard, talking on his phone. There was another man, measuring something along the southern fence line. And there, standing by the dock, was Caleb. He was on his phone too. He was wearing the same jacket he had been wearing at the restaurant the night before. Nikki was not visible from where we parked, but as Jerry and I walked up the driveway, I saw her come around the side of the house from the direction of Dot's garden. She had a coffee cup in her hand, and she looked rested and pleased with herself in the way that people look when they think the hard part is over. Caleb saw us first. For a moment he just stared. I watched his face cycle through several things quickly. Surprise. Annoyance. A flash of something that might have been guilt. There and gone, in less than a second. He ended his call and walked toward us with the stride of a man who has decided to be in control of the situation. "Dad, what are you doing here?" His voice was controlled. He glanced at Jerry, and the controlled quality became more deliberate. "You need to leave. This is private property, and the new owners have people here today. You are going to interfere with their work." I did not stop walking. I walked right up to him and stopped at a comfortable distance and looked at my son's face. He had my jaw and Dot's eyes, and the particular quality of not quite meeting your gaze that I had noticed in him since he was a teenager and I had never found a way to address. "I am not here to make trouble," I said. "I am here because I own this property." Caleb blinked. "Dad." "No," I said. "Listen to me carefully before you say anything else. When I transferred this house to your name 12 years ago, I transferred the structure, The improvements. The building. I did not transfer the land. The land has been held this entire time in Coastal Gains Holdings LLC, a company that I am the sole member of, and that company leased the right to occupy the land to you under a ground lease agreement that you signed in this same driveway 12 years ago last October. Caleb opened his mouth. That lease expired at midnight last night, I said. There was a renewal provision. It required written notice 60 days before expiration. No notice was given. No renewal was filed. So, at midnight last night, the reversionary clause in Section 16 of the lease agreement activated, and the house you sold yesterday at 1 in the afternoon to that development company reverted to Coastal Gains Holdings. To me, the man with the clipboard had stopped his phone call. He was standing very still, watching. Caleb stared at me. The controlled expression was gone. He looked like a person who has just been told that the floor under his feet is a photograph of a floor. That is not, he started. That is not legal. You gave me the house. Jerry stepped forward and held out a set of documents enclosed in a clear folder. The chain of title for the land parcel. The LLC operating agreement. The ground lease. Signed by Caleb. The reversionary clause highlighted in yellow. The county records showing Coastal Gains Holdings as the land title holder. The man with the clipboard walked over, and Jerry gave him a second copy. Who are you? The man said to Jerry. Gerald Hobbs, real estate attorney. And you are representing the purchaser, I assume. You will want to call your company's legal team right now, because what I have just given you is going to significantly change your morning. The man looked at the documents. He was a professional and he processed things quickly, and the color of his face changed in a way that told me he understood what he was reading. He walked away, already dialing. Nikki had come around from the garden during all of this. She was standing behind Caleb now, with her coffee cup held in both hands, like she had forgotten it was there. She was looking at Jerry's folder with an expression I recognized. It was the expression of someone who has walked into a room and found that all the furniture has been moved 6 inches to the left. Everything seems almost right and deeply wrong at the same time. Caleb turned to her briefly and then turned back to me. His voice had lost its control. Dad, he said, you can fix this. Just, if the lease expired, renew it. Just sign a new one. If you renew the lease, the sale goes through, the buyer keeps the house, and everything is fine. I looked at my son. If the lease was valid, he continued. Faster now, his voice tightening. Then the buyer has clear title. They keep the house. We keep the money. It is done. You just have to sign one piece of paper. I thought about the phone call 2 mornings ago. The flat voice reading from a list. The Motel 6 on Highway 80 has availability. The sound of him hanging up before I could say another word. The blocked number. I thought about Dot's gardenias and the man from the development company measuring the fence line and the sound of the word redevelopment and what that word means to a 3-acre shoreline property and a garden that had taken 3 summers to establish. Caleb, I said. You called me on Tuesday morning and you told me you had sold my home. You told me to be out within 48 hours. You told me the number of a Motel 6. And then you blocked my number. Dad, I was under a lot of pressure. The creditors. The restaurant situation. I panicked. I should have talked to you first. I know that. But right now we can still fix this. Just one signature. Where did the money go? I said. He looked away. I knew where the money went. Cooper's report had been thorough. Somewhere in Buckhead, a private equity firm was already counting their $900,000. Several credit card companies were showing cleared balances. A premium travel site had a booking for 2 business-class tickets to Lisbon, Portugal, departing Friday morning. Where did the money go? I said again, quietly. We had obligations, Nikki said. She said it simply, like that was a complete answer. You had obligations, I said. And I had a home, and Dot's garden, and 31 years of a life that I built on this piece of land with your mother. And you sold it to a company that was going to flatten it inside of 60 days. Caleb's jaw tightened. You cannot guilt me into this, Dad. If you do not renew the lease, The buyer loses the house. They are going to sue us. Do you understand that? They are going to come after us for fraud. We will lose everything. I understand that very well, I said. Then sign the lease, he said. Please. Dad. Sign the renewal and end this. The man with the clipboard had come back. He was accompanied now by another man who had gotten out of the black truck, older, in a better suit. He was the company's project manager or possibly their legal liaison. He was holding Jerry's documents, and his expression was the expression of a man who has done this long enough to know a disaster when he is holding one. Mr. Gaines, he said to me, I appreciate you being here. We need to understand our position clearly. Are you saying that the deed we received yesterday is invalid? I am saying that my son transferred a structure to you that, as of midnight last night, reverted to a company I own. The land it sits on has always been mine. He did not have the authority to convey clear title because the asset he was selling was in the process of reverting to its original owner. Whether that constitutes fraud is a matter for your attorneys and potentially for the district attorney's office to determine. I am simply here to inform you of the factual situation. The project manager looked at Caleb. The look was not friendly. You represented to us that you had clear, marketable title, he said. I did, Caleb said, and there was a desperation in his voice now that I had not heard since he was a child. I thought I did. I didn't know about the lease. I didn't remember signing it. It was 12 years ago. Ignorance of a document you signed is not a legal defense, Jerry said. How much of the sale proceeds do you still have access to? The project manager said to Caleb. The silence that followed was long enough that it answered the question. The project manager turned to the man next to him and they exchanged a few words in low voices. Then he turned back. Dio. We will be seeking full recovery, he said. Principal, interest, and consequential damages. If the funds are not returned, we will pursue criminal charges. Selling real estate without clear title with intent to collect proceeds is wire fraud in addition to real estate fraud. He looked at Caleb and Nikki without any warmth at all. I suggest you contact an attorney in the next 10 minutes. Nikki sat down on the porch step. She sat down hard, like her legs had simply stopped cooperating. The coffee cup was still in her hands. She set it down carefully on the step beside her, which seemed like a very small and very human thing to do in that moment. Caleb turned to me one more time. His face had changed. The calculation was gone. He looked like a man who has just understood, really understood, what is on the other side of the door he has walked through. He looked young in a way that hurt me to see. Dad, he said, I am sorry. I am sorry I called you like that, and I am sorry about the way we handled this. I was scared, and I made a terrible decision. I know that. But please, I am asking you as your son, do not let this destroy us. We can work something out. I will pay you back, whatever it takes. Just sign the lease renewal. Please. I was quiet for a moment. 31 years on this porch. The pelican this morning. Dot's voice in the driveway, telling me where she wanted the kitchen window. Caleb, at 8 years old, asleep under the Christmas tree. A lease renewal would fix everything. For them, the sale would be validated. The buyer would have clear title. Caleb and Nikki would walk away from Georgia and fly to Portugal, and whatever came next would come next. I would lose the house. The gardenias would come down in 60 days with everything else. I am your son, he said again. I know you are, I said. I turned to Jerry. Do not file the civil suit, I said. Let the development company and the district attorney handle what they handle. I am not going to add to it. But do not file the renewal either. Jerry nodded once. I turned back to Caleb. I have spent your whole life protecting you from consequences, I said. I paid for the business licenses and the restaurant build-outs and the insurance premiums after the fire suppression system. I have been the floor under your feet every time you fell through the ceiling. I kept doing it because your mother would have wanted me to, and because I believed you would find your footing eventually. His eyes were wet. But you called me on a Tuesday morning and told me to pack my things, I said. You sold 31 years to pay a debt you created by living a life you could not afford. You did not ask me. I am sorry, he whispered. I know you are, I said again. But sorry is not a document. Sorry does not rebuild what you took apart. The only thing I can give you right now is the truth, which is that this is the consequence of what you chose. I am not going to shield you from it. That is the most honest thing I have done for you in years. I looked at him for one more moment. My son, Dot's eyes looking back at me. And then I looked away, because it was the only thing I could do and still mean what I had said. I walked to Dot's garden along the south wall. The gardenias were not in bloom yet, it being the wrong time of year, but the bushes were full and dark green and healthy. She had planted 9 of them. They were still all there, all 9, exactly where she had put them. Surviving without her for 4 years, the way that things she had loved tended to do. I heard Jerry behind me saying something to the project manager about a schedule for filing. I heard Nikki's voice, higher now, speaking to Caleb in an urgent undertone. I heard Caleb say something I could not make out. I crouched down beside the closest gardenia bush and touched one of the leaves. The leaf was waxy and cool in the morning air. Behind me was the house we had built together. Ahead of me was the marsh and the water and the long, flat horizon of the Georgia coast that I had looked at every morning for 31 years. This house belonged to me again. The ground I was crouching on belonged to me. Nobody was going to bulldoze Dot's gardenias. Whatever came next, whatever courts and creditors and consequences were on their way to my son's life, that was a tide he had set in motion himself. I had not done that to him. I had only refused to stop it. There is a difference between those two things, and I had spent too many years confusing them. I stood up and brushed my hands on my trousers. I walked back past the house, past Caleb, who was now on the phone with someone I presumed was a lawyer, and past Nikki, who looked at me with an expression I could not read and did not try to, and down the driveway to where Jerry was waiting at his car. Take me home, I said. He looked at me. I meant to the inn, I said. And then tomorrow, I am going to find a contractor and start thinking about what I want to do with the kitchen. Jerry opened the car door. As we pulled out of the driveway, I did not look back at the house. I looked out at the marsh grass moving in the morning wind, all that green and gold movement, everything bending and recovering, the way things do when they are rooted in good ground. Dot always said that the secret to the gardenias was patience. She said, you could not rush the roots. You had to let them find their way down in their own time. Once they found it, she said, nothing was going to move them. She had been right about most things. She was right about that too. If you believe that protecting yourself is not the same as being cruel, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Have you ever had to let someone face a consequence you could have prevented? Tell me your story in the comments. I read every one of them.